In today's episode, we'll talk about the man who set the record for the fastest car on an avenue in the UK, reaching a speed of 320 kilometers per hour in an unregistered car. Although this feat made him famous, it also landed him in jail and brought some legal problems, which we'll discuss later. The name of this man? Kazuhiko Smokey Nagata. He is one of the most notorious figures in the JDM, Japanese domestic market, community and the man behind one of Japan's largest custom car shops, Top Secret. He's known for his daring projects, like when he swapped a Nissan RB26 engine into a Supra or installed a modern GTR drivetrain into a Nissan R32. But his most insane project, without a doubt, was putting a V12 engine into a Supra Mk4. Surprisingly, he started his career as a farmer in a small town in Japan. Now, let's dive into the story of this iconic figure in the automotive world and understand what it took to create one of Japan's most legendary custom car shops. Like many families living in rural Hokkaido, a small town in Japan, Kazuhiko Nagata's family worked on their farm, growing wheat and soybeans. From a very young age, he found himself helping his family with the harvests, but it didn't take long for him to realize that he enjoyed driving the farm truck more than harvesting soybeans. Luckily, his father was also a car enthusiast, so whenever there was a truck or piece of equipment to repair on the farm, Kazuhiko was called to help. But for a 14-year-old, this simply wasn't enough. So, he decided to buy a motorcycle, one that he could tune and race on the farm. A little later, he bought a cart, but by the time he turned 15, he had saved enough money to buy a 1970 Mitsubishi Galant GTO that was practically falling apart. But for him, it was the perfect project to start learning how to work on cars more skillfully. There was just one problem. The car was in terrible condition, and Kazuhiko simply didn't know how to fix it or have the tools needed for the job. Fortunately, his neighbor worked at Toyota and knew a thing or two about cars, so they worked together on the Galant, and after a year, they managed to get the car running. Proudly, the 16-year-old Kazuhiko now had his own car, which he drove everywhere, even parking it in the teacher's lot at his school because it was safer. In Japan, you need to be at least 18 years old to legally drive on the streets. So, when the school's administration discovered that a 16-year-old was parking in the teacher's lot, they had no choice but to expel him. When his neighbor found out what had happened, he decided to help and offered Kazuhiko a job at Toyota, as a mechanic. At 16, he became the youngest mechanic Toyota had ever employed. But this meant he had to work harder than anyone else to get noticed within the company. He learned everything about cars, but despite enjoying working on these machines, fixing other people's cars wasn't really his thing. He wanted to start a personal project, a car for himself that he could customize in any way he wanted. So, with the money he earned at Toyota, he bought a Toyota Celica. As soon as his shift ended at night, when no one was around to see, he would take his car to the shop, where he had access to the right equipment, and start modifying it. At some point, that car became his obsession. He found himself spending more time working on his Celica than on his actual job. And when his bosses found out, as you might imagine, they weren't too happy and decided to fire him. He spent 4 years at Toyota, but in the end, his passion for cars left him in the same place he was when he was 16, unemployed. But Kazuhiko didn't give up. With all the experience he had gained from his years at Toyota, he was determined to use that knowledge to go even further. So, he decided to move to the only place in Japan where his passion for cars would be appreciated, Tokyo. Upon arriving in Tokyo, he experienced a massive culture shock and realized that life in the big city was very different. Everything was more expensive, so if he wanted to live there, he needed to make money fast. That's when he found a job at a custom shop called Trust. At that time, Trust was a top shop since it was one of the oldest in 1977. Since it was a well-respected shop, Kazuhiko started with small tasks, like packing equipment for delivery. But as you might imagine, he quickly got bored and decided to do something more meaningful to finally satisfy his intrinsic desire to work on cars. He had the brilliant idea of offering his help to the racing department after his shift, just for the experience of customizing machines, practically as a volunteer. The engineers were more than happy to have an extra hand to help with these racing cases. Over time, with all the racing experience he gained, Kazuhiko did what we would all do. He started working on his own projects as well, using the company's machinery. He would create new parts, make various customizations to make his cars as fast as possible. He did all of this at night, when no one was around to see. Eventually, as you might imagine, he became one of the best mechanics at Trust. Despite his age, he stood out to such an extent that he became an indispensable part of the company. So, when his bosses discovered that he was using their equipment to customize his own cars, although they might have wanted to, they didn't fire him. Instead, they made a deal. The deal was that he could work at night, but only when no one was watching, and he had to promise not to tell anyone. After all, Trust was a big company with a reputation to uphold, so it was crucial that this arrangement stayed between them. This deal was a secret, or rather, you might be wondering why it's called Top Secret. The reason for this name is that, about a year after Kazuhiko made this deal, he decided to leave Trust and open his own custom shop, a shop destined to become one of the most iconic in the JDM scene. And that's how Top Secret was born. He couldn't have left at a better time. It was the perfect moment during the JDM era, a time when legendary cars were being released, like the AE86, the 4th generation Supra, and the Godzilla, which was still terrorizing the streets of Tokyo. Unlike other custom shops, Top Secret aimed to leave a permanent mark on this emerging culture. Kazuhiko wanted to ride this wave, with the philosophy that Top Secret needed to prove to the world that Japanese cars could be the fastest cars on the planet. But for his shop to truly make history, it needed to build a reputation, it needed to shock the world. So, his first project was a Toyota Chaser with a 2JZ GTE engine and some rather modest upgrades. This car was a huge success, and through it, Kazuhiko earned enough money to build his own car. That machine was the Nissan Skyline R32 GTR, and in his hands, it became a beast, all in the name of speed. He used this machine to race in the dead of night on the streets of Tokyo, reaching speeds of over 200 km per hour, all while weaving through traffic. His early work gained considerable notoriety within the community. Top Secret was finally beginning to write its name in history. But to truly become a protagonist, something unprecedented was needed, something that would prove that the cars built at Top Secret had real significance. That's why, when the opportunity arose, he came up with one of the best marketing strategies ever, a strategy that resulted in him being arrested and banned from the country for a decade. But first, let's take a step back. To carry out the strategy, he first needed a car. He chose the Toyota Supra Mk4, removed its 2JZ engine, and replaced it with a Skyline GTR RB26 engine. His reasoning was that while the 2JZ was good, he needed an engine with more power to truly race. After all the customizations, that Supra was pushing nearly 1,000 horsepower. While working on this project, a British magazine called Max Power got in touch with Kazuhiko. Max Power magazine was a publication that ranked the best British cars at the time. Knowing that they were among the biggest in the UK, when they invited him to showcase his Supra at the Max Power Live show in 1998, Kazuhiko knew it was a unique opportunity to show the world what he was truly capable of. And, of course, he accepted. When he arrived in the UK, Nagata spent the entire day burning rubber and laying down rubber for the cameras, hence the nickname Smokey, which roughly translates to smoke in English. After this dazzling display, the Max Power journalists invited Smokey to race down a city avenue. Since his car was only registered in Japan, he wasn't even supposed to be driving it on public roads, but as you might imagine, he accepted the challenge without hesitation. So, at 4 a.m., on a rainy and cold night, Smokey, in the middle of the UK's longest road, revved his engine, smoked the tires, and took off. That day, he reached approximately 320 km per hour before being stopped by the police. You might be wondering how the police caught him. The truth is, Smokey pulled over willingly because he didn't want any trouble with the law. Despite the setbacks, this feat put Top Secret on the global map and solidified Kazuhiko's reputation as one of the biggest names in the JDM community. After returning to Japan, he continued to work on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible, including a Toyota Supra for Malawian kwachas with a custom V12 engine producing 930 horsepower. Kazuhiko Nagata, or Smokey as he became known, not only created fast cars but also left a legacy in the world of automotive customization. Today, Top Secret is recognized worldwide as one of Japan's largest and most respected custom shops, and Kazuhiko remains a living legend, whose passion for speed and innovation continues to inspire enthusiasts around the world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to follow the channel, hit the notification bell to receive updates on new videos, and leave your like and comment. Your opinion is very important to us. See you next time.